The ships came down from the sky on a Tuesday morning. Commander Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of humanity's first interstellar vessel, the Horizon's Edge, and watched 12 massive alien craft descend through Earth's atmosphere. They moved with a grace that made human engineering look like children's toys. Each vessel was different, some curved like shells, others angular like crystals. One that seemed to shift and change shape as it moved. "They received our FTL test signal," said Dr. Marcus Chen, standing beside her. His voice carried a mixture of wonder and fear. "They came to welcome us to the galactic community." Elena wanted to believe that. Humanity had dreamed of this moment for centuries. First contact, proof that they were not alone. But something about the way those ships moved, the way they positioned themselves in a perfect circle round Earth's major cities, made her stomach tight with worry. The aliens called themselves the Galactic Concord. 12 species, some millions of years old, who had long ago claimed authority over intelligent life in this region of space. They had come, they said, to evaluate humanity's worthiness for membership among the stars. The evaluation began within hours. Elena was chosen as one of Earth's representatives, along with scientists, philosophers, and world leaders. They were brought aboard the largest Concord vessel, a ship belonging to the Vorathan, the eldest and most powerful of the 12 species. The Vorathan themselves were tall and thin, with silver skin and eyes that held no pupils, only swirling galaxies of color. High Adjudicator Kellerus of the Vorathan led the evaluation. He stood before the human delegation in a chamber of white light and spoke in a voice that somehow translated itself directly into their minds. "You have achieved faster-than-light travel," Kellerus said. "This triggers automatic evaluation under Concord law. All emerging species must be judged before they spread beyond their birth system." "Judged by what standards?" Elena asked. Kellerus tilted his head as if the question was strange. "By the standards of civilization, of course. Genetic stability, psionic potential, civilizational harmony, the ability to exist peacefully within the galactic order." Over the following weeks, the Concord examined everything about humanity. They studied human DNA and found it chaotic, filled with what they called evolutionary noise. They tested humans for psionic abilities and found almost none. They analyzed human history and found endless war, conflict, and division. Elena watched the adjudicators grow more and more disappointed with each passing day. "Your species fights among itself constantly," said Adjudicator Melith of the Cyrene, "a species that resembled floating jellyfish made of light. Your nations compete for resources. Your religions conflict. Your very cells contain competing genetic instructions. We call that diversity," Elena replied. "It makes us adaptable. It makes you unstable," Melith corrected. "Unpredictable, dangerous." The final evaluation took place in the great chamber of the Vorathan flagship. All 12 adjudicators sat in a circle, with the human delegation standing in the center like criminals awaiting sentencing. Kellerus spoke for them all. "Humanity," he said, "you are too young, too aggressive, too chaotic. You lack the harmony required for membership in the Galactic Concord. Your genetic code is unstable. Your minds are closed to the psionic realm. Your history shows a species incapable of peace." Elena stepped forward. "We've made mistakes, but we've also grown. We've learned. Give us time, and we can prove ourselves. Time is precisely what we cannot give you." Kellerus replied, "An unstable species with faster-than-light capability is a threat to galactic order. You will spread your chaos across the stars like a disease. Then what do you propose?" The 12 adjudicators looked at each other. Some kind of silent communication passed between them. When Kellerus spoke again, his voice held no emotion. "Exile," he said. "You will be removed from civilized space. Your species will be transported to the Dead Expansa region beyond our borders, where no habitable worlds exist. Your home system's coordinates will be erased from all star charts. You will be classified as a failed emergence and removed from galactic records." The human delegation erupted in protests. Elena raised her voice above them all. "You can't do this. We have rights. You have nothing." Kellerus interrupted. "You are not members of the Concord. You have no standing under our law. This is not a punishment. It is a precaution, a quarantine. You will be forgotten and the galaxy will be safer for it. There was no appeal, no negotiation. The Concorde's decision was absolute. The following months were a nightmare of forced evacuation. Humanity was allowed to bring what they could carry: people, supplies, technology, records. A fleet of colony ships was hastily constructed, using designs the Concorde provided. Efficient, practical designs meant for a one-way journey. Elena stood on the bridge of the lead colony ship, the Last Hope. As Earth grew smaller in the view screen, billions of humans packed into vessels never meant for comfort, carrying whatever pieces of their civilization they could save: art, music, books, seeds, the genetic samples of every species on Earth, and memories. They carried their memories. A Concorde escort fleet surrounded the human convoy, ensuring they traveled directly to the dead expanse without deviation. The journey took 3 months. 3 months of silence from the Concorde ships. 3 months of grief and anger and fear among the human vessels. When they finally arrived at the edge of the dead expanse, the Concorde fleet stopped. Adjudicator Kellerus appeared on every human view screen simultaneously. "This is where we leave you," he said. "Beyond this point lies the dead expanse. Unstable stars, rogue planets, asteroid fields, nothing of value, nothing worth claiming. You will find no allies there, no resources, no hope." "And if we survive?" Elena asked. "If we build something in your wasteland?" Kellerus made a sound that might have been laughter. "You will not survive. No species has. But if you somehow manage to persist, it will not matter. In a few generations, the Concorde will forget you ever existed. Your name will be erased from history. Your exile will become a footnote, and then not even that." The Concorde ships turned and jumped away, leaving the human convoy alone at the edge of known space. Elena looked at the view screen, at the vast darkness of the dead expanse stretching before them. Around her, the bridge crew waited in silence, waiting for her to speak, waiting for hope. She thought about Kellerus's words: forgotten, erased, failed. Something hardened inside her. "Open a channel to all ships," she said. The communication officer nodded. "Channel open, Commander." Elena stood straight and spoke clearly, knowing that billions of human beings were listening to her words. "They called us failures," she said. "They said we would not survive. They said we would be forgotten." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Let them forget. Let them erase us from their records and their memories. Let them believe we are dead." She looked at the darkness ahead, and she smiled. "We will survive. We will build. We will grow. And one day, not tomorrow, not next year, maybe not for 1,000 years, we will remind them that humanity does not die quietly." She turned to the navigation officer. "Take us in. The dead expanse is our home now. Let's see what we can make of it." The Last Hope moved forward, leading the human convoy into the unknown darkness. Behind them, the last Concorde marker beacon blinked once, twice, and then went dark. Humanity had been banished and forgotten, but humanity had a very long memory of its own. And in the silent depths of space, far from the light of civilized stars, they began to build. The Concorde would have 1,000 years to forget about the species they had thrown away. It would not be nearly enough time. 500 years had passed since the exile. Admiral Yuki Tanaka stood on the observation deck of the Remembrance, flagship of the human continuity's Third Fleet, and looked out at a sight that would have been impossible to imagine in Elena Vasquez's time. Shipyards stretched across the asteroid field for thousands of kilometers. Hundreds of vessels in various stages of construction floated in the void, their skeletal frames glowing with welding fires. Mining drones moved between the rocks like swarms of fireflies, extracting the rare minerals that the Concorde had never bothered to harvest. The dead expanse had turned out to be anything but dead. Yuki smiled as she reviewed the latest reports. The Concorde had sent humanity to this region because they believed it was worthless. Unstable stars, rogue planets, dangerous asteroid fields, no habitable worlds, no easy resources. What the Concorde had failed to understand was that humanity had never needed things to be easy. The first century after exile had been brutal. Thousands died learning to survive in the hostile environment. Colony ships broke down. Food supplies ran short. Despair threatened to overwhelm hope. But humanity adapted. They learned to harvest energy from unstable stars that other species avoided. They hollowed out asteroids and turned them into habitats. They built generation ships that could travel between the scattered pockets of resources, mobile factories that produced everything a civilization needed. Most importantly, they learned to scatter. The scattering, as it came to be called, was the decision that saved humanity. Rather than staying together in one vulnerable location, human communities deliberately spread themselves across the dead expanse. Thousands of independent colonies, millions of small habitats, no central target for enemies to strike, no single point of failure. And everywhere humanity went, they found something the Concord had either missed or deliberately hidden. They were not alone in the dead expanse. "Admiral," said Commander Singh, approaching Yuki with a data pad, "the VEF delegation has arrived." Yuki nodded and made her way to the diplomatic section of the ship. The VEF were the first species humanity had encountered in the expanse, survivors of a race the Concord had supposedly exterminated 5,000 years ago for the crime of civilizational deviance. The VEF looked like humanoid insects, with compound eyes and delicate antennae. When the Concord had come to destroy them, a small group had fled into the dead expanse, surviving in hidden asteroid bases for millennia. When human explorers found them, they had expected hostility. Instead, they found allies. Ambassador Kirixis of the VEF stood in the diplomatic chamber, her antennae moving gently as she spoke. "Admiral Tanaka, thank you for receiving us. You're always welcome, Ambassador. What news from the deep colonies?" "Good news. The Morath have agreed to join the continuity." Yuki felt a surge of satisfaction. The Morath made the sixth species to join humanity's growing alliance. Like the VEF, they were supposed to be extinct. Like the VEF, they had fled into the expanse to escape Concord judgment. A pattern had emerged over the centuries. The Concord didn't just exile or exterminate species they found unworthy. They erased them from history, pretended they had never existed. The dead expanse was filled with the survivors of these forgotten genocides, hiding in the darkness, and humanity was gathering them together. "How many are they?" Yuki asked. "Approximately 200 million, across 40 star systems. They bring significant expertise in biological engineering." Yuki nodded. Each species brought something unique. The VEF understood energy manipulation in ways humanity was still learning. The Lorth and other extinct species had perfected stealth technology. The Kelani had developed medical science that could extend human lifespans by centuries. Alone, each group had barely survived. Together, they were building something remarkable. "There's more," Kirixis said, her compound eyes glittering. "Our intelligence network has new information from Concord space." This was perhaps humanity's greatest advantage. The species that had fled into the expanse were believed to be extinct. When they traveled into Concord territory, no one looked twice at them. No one suspected. They made perfect spies. What have they learned? The Concord is weakening. 3 of the founding species have entered a cold war over mining rights in the Outer Rim. The Sireni have begun enslaving lesser species for labor. The Vorthen have grown so focused on internal politics that they've stopped exploring entirely. Yuki absorbed this information. The great civilization that had judged humanity unworthy was rotting from within. "What about records of humanity?" "We checked. You remain classified as a failed emergence. The last official mention of your species was 900 years ago. A single sentence confirming that the exile was successful and no further action was required." They had truly forgotten. The Concord believed humanity was dead, scattered to nothing in the cosmic wasteland. They had no idea that the species they threw away had built an empire of 40,000 star systems. Yuki walked to the observation window and looked out at the shipyards. 500 years of building, 500 years of patience. The philosophy they called the long patience had guided every decision. Don't reveal yourself until you're ready. Watch, learn, grow. Remember, my grandmother's grandmother was on the original colony ships, Yuki said quietly. She kept a journal, passed it down through the family. Do you know what Elena Vasquez wrote on the day they entered the dead expanse? What did she write? She wrote, "They gave us to gifts today, though they meant neither as kindness. They gave us a place where no one will watch us, and they gave us something to prove." Kirixis made a sound that might have been a laugh. Your ancestor was wise. She was angry. Yuki corrected. We all were, for a long time. But anger fades. What replaced it was something stronger. What? Determination, patience, and memory. Yuki turned back to the ambassador. We remember every species the Concord erased. We remember every judgment they made. And we remember that they threw us away because we were different. She looked out at the shipyards again. At the ships being built to designs the Concord could never imagine. When the time comes, she said, we won't make the same mistake they did. We won't judge others by how similar they are to us. We'll judge them by how they treat those who are different. The communication console beeped. Commander Singh's voice came through, urgent. Admiral, we have a situation. A Concord surveyor vessel has just jumped into our territory. Sector 7. They're scanning everything. Yuki's heart rate increased, but her voice stayed calm. How did they get this far in? Navigation error, based on their trajectory. They were probably mapping the expanse edge and jumped to deep by accident. Can we intercept before they jump out? Already done. The Third Fleet's picket ships have surrounded them. They're not going anywhere. Yuki took a deep breath. This was the moment they had prepared for. Eventually, the Concord would stumble upon them. The question was, what would humanity do when it happened? What forces have they seen? Just the picket line. 8 vessels. But Admiral, the Remembrance and the main fleet are visible on their sensors now. They're seeing 3,000 human warships, 3,000 ships, a force that could have conquered their original solar system 100 times over. A fraction of humanity's true military strength. Open a channel to the surveyor. The view screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of a Concord vessel. A Vorathan captain stared back at her, his galaxy-filled eyes wide with something Yuki had never seen on one of their faces, fear. I am Admiral Yuki Tanaka of the Human Continuity, she said. You have entered our space without permission. The Vorathan captain's mouth opened and closed several times before he spoke. Human, that's impossible. Your species was exiled. You were declared extinct. Reports of our extinction were greatly exaggerated. How? How many of you are there? Yuki smiled. Enough. You have a choice, Captain. You can return to your Concord with a message from us, or you can stay here and see what we've built. The choice is yours. The captain was silent for a long moment. Then he said, what message? Tell them this. We remember you. Do you remember us? The Vorathan's silver face went pale. They will send fleets. They will destroy you. They're welcome to try. Yuki leaned forward. But before you go, Captain, look at what's behind me. Look carefully. Then ask yourself, are we the ones who should be afraid? The captain looked. 3,000 warships, gleaming in the light of distant stars. Technology 5 centuries advanced from anything the Concord had developed. And in the Vorathan's eyes, Yuki saw the moment he realized the truth. The galaxy was about to change. The Vorathan captain's name was Catherine, and he chose to stay. 3 months after his vessel accidentally jumped into continuity space, he stood on a balcony overlooking the city of New Alexandria, the capital of humanity's quiet empire. Behind him, the human ambassador who had become his guide, a woman named Amara Okonkwo, waited patiently for his reaction. Catherine had seen many things in his 2,000 years of life. He had witnessed the rise and fall of lesser civilizations. He had stood in the grand halls of the Concord's founding worlds. He had believed, with absolute certainty, that the Vorathan and their allied species represented the peak of galactic achievement. He had been wrong. New Alexandria spread before him like a dream made solid. Towers of crystal and metal rose toward an artificial sky, their surfaces alive with flowing light. Parks and gardens broke up the urban landscape, filled with plants from 100 different worlds. And everywhere there were people. Humans walked the streets, alongside the insect-like Veth and the four-armed Morath. The crystalline Kalani floated past on their gravity platforms. Children of a dozen species played together in the parks. A civilization of the rejected and forgotten, built on the ashes of exile. How many? Catherine asked, his voice barely a whisper. Citizens. Amara joined him at the balcony railing. Approximately 800 billion, across all species. 12 species in full membership. Another 20 in associate status. 12 species. But we only erased 6, You erased 6. Other species you never even knew existed found their way to us over the centuries. The expanse is a big place, and word spreads among those who have nowhere else to go. Catherine gripped the railing. His ship's crew had been given the same opportunity he had: stay and learn, or return with humanity's message. Half had chosen to stay. The other half were already on their way back to Concord space. He should have gone with them. His duty was clear, but something had stopped him. A need to understand. A need to see how a species judged as failures had built something that made the Concord look like children playing with blocks. "Show me more," he said. "I want to see everything." Over the following weeks, Amara took him across the human continuity. She showed him shipyards that produced vessels in quantities the Concord couldn't match. She showed him research stations where human scientists worked alongside Kalani doctors and Lorith engineers, combining their knowledge in ways that had produced technologies centuries ahead of Concord standards. She showed him the Archive of Remembrance. This was a vast complex on the moon of a gas giant, dedicated to preserving the memory of every species the Concord had erased. Holographic displays told the stories of the Veth, the Moroth, the Kalani, and dozens of others. Every atrocity the Concord had committed was documented here. Every lie they had told was exposed. Why? Catherine asked as they walked through the halls. Why preserve all of this pain? Because memory is the foundation of justice, Amara replied. If we forget what was done, we risk repeating it. If we remember, we can choose to be different. Different how? The Concord judges species by how similar they are to the founding races. If you think like them, look like them, behave like them, you're civilized. If you don't, you're erased. Amara stopped in front of a display showing human children playing with Veth young. We judge species by how they treat others, not by what they are, but by what they do. Catherine thought about this. In 2,000 years of Concord membership, he had never questioned the founding principles: genetic stability, psionic potential, civilizational harmony. These were the measures of worth. They had always been the measures of worth. But looking at this civilization of misfits and rejects, thriving in the darkness where they had been sent to die, he wondered if there might be other ways to measure value. What happens now? He asked. Your fleet has revealed itself. My people know you exist. War is coming. Amara nodded slowly. Probably. The Concord won't accept that we survived. They'll try to finish what they started 2,000 years ago. Then why did you let my ship go? Why send a message at all? You could have remained hidden for centuries more. We could have. But the long patience was never meant to last forever. We've been watching the Concord decay for generations. The wars between your member species, the slavery, the corruption. Eventually, something is going to break. We'd rather be the ones to decide when and how you want to destroy the Concord. Amara shook her head. No, we want to replace it. Not with humanity in charge. We've had our fill of species who think they're superior to everyone else. We want to build something new. A community based on cooperation instead of judgment, acceptance instead of erasure. And if we refuse, if we fight, then we'll win. Amara's voice held no pride, no anger, just simple certainty. We've had 2,000 years to prepare, Captain. 2,000 years to build, to innovate, to grow. We didn't waste a single day. Every ship, every weapon, every strategy, all of it designed for the day when we would face the Concord again. She looked at him directly. But we don't want to win through destruction. We want to win through example. That's why we're offering you a choice. That's why we let your crew decide for themselves. And that's why we're giving the Concord one chance to change before we act. Catherine stood in silence for a long moment. All his life, he had been taught that the Vorothan were the wisest and most advanced species in the galaxy. That the Concord's way was the only way. That species who didn't meet their standards were dangers to be eliminated. But here, in the heart of the civilization, the Concord had tried to kill. He saw something different. He saw species who had been judged unworthy living together in peace. He saw technology that made Concord achievements look primitive. He saw a philosophy that offered belonging instead of conformity. I would like to send a message to my people, he said finally. Of course. What would you like to say? Catherine thought carefully. The words he chose now might determine the fate of trillions. I want to tell them the truth, he said. I want to tell them what I've seen here. That humanity survived. That they built something remarkable. And that everything we believed about inferior species was wrong. Amara smiled softly. That's a dangerous message, Captain. The Concorde doesn't react well to having its beliefs challenged. No, Catherine agreed. They don't, but perhaps it's time for that to change. He turned back to look at the archive of remembrance, at the faces of all the species the Concorde had erased from history. My people committed great crimes, he said quietly. We called it maintaining order. We called it protecting civilization. But it was murder, genocide, erasure of everything that made those species unique. It was. Amara agreed. And yet you showed me mercy. You gave me the choice to learn instead of forcing me to accept. Why? Amara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, because 2,000 years ago, the Concorde judged humanity and found us unworthy. They threw us away like garbage. They assumed we would die, and they forgot about us. She turned to face him. We could have become like them. We could have built our empire on hatred and revenge. But instead, we chose to remember what it felt like to be judged unfairly. And we promised ourselves that we would never make others feel that way. Even those who wronged you. Especially those who wronged us. If we judge them the way they judged us, what makes us different? The cycle just continues forever. Catherine felt something shift inside him. 2,000 years of certainty, cracking. Send your message, Amara said. Tell them the truth. And when the Concorde sends its war fleet, because they will, we'll be waiting. Not to destroy them, but to show them what they could become if they choose to change. Catherine nodded slowly. The galaxy was about to change. And he, a captain of the very civilization that had caused so much suffering, might play a small part in making it change for the better. It was, he realized, more than he deserved, but perhaps that was the point. The grand chamber of Primarch Station had not seen such chaos in 1,000 years. High Adjudicator Velorus of the Vorthan stood at the central podium, trying to maintain order as representatives of the 12 Concorde species shouted over each other. The holographic display behind her showed the message that had arrived 3 days ago, a recording from Captain Catherine, describing everything he had seen in human continuity space. 40,000 star systems, 800 billion citizens, 12 member species, including 6 the Concorde had supposedly exterminated. Technology centuries ahead of anything the Concorde possessed. And at the heart of it all, the species they had thrown away 2,000 years ago. This is impossible, shouted Ambassador Threx of the Morvani, his reptilian scales flushing red with anger. We saw the reports. Humanity died in the dead expanse. They could not have survived. Clearly, they did, replied Scholar Alithy of the Cyrene, her jellyfish-like form pulsing with agitation. The question is what we do about it now. What we do is obvious. Threx slammed his clawed hand on his console. We destroy them. We should have been more thorough the first time. With what? Asked Commander Vex of the Kelrani, his voice cold and calculating. Catherine's report mentions a fleet of 3,000 ships at their border. 3,000. Our entire combined military is perhaps 5 times that number. And his report suggests what he saw was only a fraction of their true strength. The chamber fell into uneasy silence. Velorus raised her hand for attention. We have verified Catherine's identity and confirmed that his message has not been altered. He speaks the truth as he witnessed it. The question before this council is simple. How do we respond? There is only one response, said Elder Corinth, the oldest living Vorthan, and the one who had cast the deciding vote on humanity's exile. 2 millennia ago. His voice crackled with age, but his authority was absolute. We end what we started. We gather the full might of the Concorde and burn these humans out of existence once and for all. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Velorus felt the tide turning toward war. We should at least consider negotiation, she said carefully. Catherine's report indicates that humanity is offering dialogue. Dialogue. Corinth's laugh was bitter. They are playing for time, building more ships, growing stronger while we debate. No, we strike now, before they become unstoppable. The vote was called. 10 species voted for war. 2 abstained. None voted for peace. Within a month, the largest fleet in Concorde history assembled at the border of the dead expanse. 500 warships representing the combined military power of 12 ancient civilizations. Elder Corinth himself took command, determined to correct the mistake he had made 2,000 years ago. Today, Corinth announced to his fleet, "We finish what our ancestors started. Today, we remind the galaxy what happens to species that defy the natural order." The fleet jumped. They emerged in continuity border space, expecting to find scattered human defenses. Instead, they found a wall of ships stretching across their entire field of view. 15,000 vessels in perfect formation. Human dreadnoughts the size of small moons. Destroyers and cruisers in configurations the Concorde had never seen. And between them, ships of designs that clearly weren't human vessels, Morith battlecruisers, Kelani medical frigates, a united fleet, a civilization ready for war. Corinth stared at the display in disbelief. That's impossible. There can't be that many. Sensors confirm, Elder, his tactical officer reported, voice shaking. 15,312 vessels. All weapons charged. All shields active. A communication request appeared on the main screen. Corinth accepted it. A human woman appeared. She wore a simple uniform, her gray hair pulled back from a face that showed no fear, no anger, only calm certainty. "I am Supreme Admiral Chen Meilin of the Human Continuity," she said. "You have entered our space with hostile intent. This is your first and only warning. Withdraw now, and no shots will be fired. Continue forward, and we will defend ourselves." Corinth straightened to his full height. "You dare threaten us? We are the Galactic Concorde. We have ruled this galaxy for millions of years. You are nothing but a failed species we threw away." "You threw us away," Chen agreed. "And look what we became. Now what do you choose? Talks or war?" "War," Corinth spat. "Today you learn the price of defying your betters." He cut the connection and gave the order to attack. The battle lasted for hours. It was not a battle. It was a demonstration. Human weapons burned through Concorde shields like they weren't there. Human defenses shrugged off attacks that should have been devastating. And the tactics, the precision, the coordination between human and allied species showed the results of 2,000 years of preparation. Not a single human or allied ship was destroyed. By the 4th hour, half the Concorde fleet was crippled or disabled. Corinth's own flagship drifted in space, its engines destroyed, its weapons dark. Escape pods scattered in all directions as crew members abandoned ship. And then the firing stopped. Admiral Chen's face appeared on every functional screen in the Concorde fleet. "You came here to destroy us," she said. "You had every intention of wiping out every human and every species that stands with us. But we are not like you. We don't believe in erasure. Then what do you want?" Corinth demanded. "Our surrender? No, we want you to choose. Right now, in this moment, you can choose to be different than you've always been." "I don't understand. You came to destroy us because we're different from you, because we don't fit your definition of civilization. But look at what that philosophy has cost you." Chen gestured to the debris field that had once been a Concorde fleet. "We had 2,000 years to prepare for this moment. We could have built weapons that would have wiped out your entire species. We could have taken revenge for every atrocity the Concorde committed." She leaned forward. "But we didn't. We built a civilization that welcomes those you threw away. We built ships that disable instead of destroy. And today, we choose to let you go. Not because we're weak, but because we're choosing to be something better." Corinth was silent. Around him, his bridge crew watched with expressions of shock and something else. Something that looked almost like hope. "We're offering you a chance," Chen continued. "Not conquest, not humiliation. A chance to change, to join us if you want, to go your own way if you prefer. But the era of the Concorde judging other species as worthy or unworthy, that era is over. Accept that, and we can build something new together. Refuse, and we'll keep defeating your fleets until you understand. Why?" Corinth asked, his voice cracking. "Why show mercy to those who would have shown you none?" Chen smiled sadly. "Because 2,000 years ago, an ancestor of mine stood on the deck of a colony ship and watched your people banish us to die. She made a promise that day. She promised that if we survived, we would never become like you. We would never judge others the way you judged us." She straightened. "I'm keeping her promise. Now what's your choice?" Corinth looked at his ruined fleet, at the wall of human and allied ships that could have destroyed them all, at the mercy being offered by those who had every right to seek vengeance, and for the first time in 2,000 years, he questioned everything he had ever believed. "I need to speak with the Concord," he said quietly. "This decision, it's too big for one person. Take all the time you need," Chen replied. "We've waited 2,000 years. We can wait a little longer." The communication ended. Corinth sat in his command chair, surrounded by the wreckage of Concord arrogance, and began to consider the possibility that everything he had ever believed was wrong. The galaxy was about to change, and for the first time, the change might be for the better. 10 years had passed since the Battle of the Border. Ambassador Yuki Tanaka, great-granddaughter of the Admiral, who had first revealed humanity to the Concord, stood on the restored surface of Earth and watched representatives of 30 species file into the Amphitheater of Unity. The building had been constructed specifically for this day, rising from the green plains where humanity's first cities had once stood. The sky was blue again. The oceans were clean. The forests had returned. After 2,000 years of exile, humanity had come home and they had brought their friends with them. "Nervous?" asked a familiar voice. Yuki turned to find Catherine beside her. The Vorthan, who had once been a Concord captain, now served as humanity's chief liaison to the former enemy species. His galaxy-filled eyes reflected the afternoon sun. "A little," Yuki admitted. "This is the moment everything changes. Either we build something lasting, or we watch it fall apart. It won't fall apart. Not after everything we've all sacrificed to get here." The 10 years since the battle had been turbulent. The Concord had shattered not from external pressure, but from internal conflict. When Elder Corinth returned with his defeated fleet and described what he had witnessed, the ancient alliance had cracked down the middle. 3 species, the Sireni, the Kelrani, and the Morvani, had immediately reached out to the human continuity, requesting membership in whatever new order humanity was building. They had seen the writing on the wall. The old ways were dying, for species had chosen neutrality, watching from the sidelines as history unfolded. They neither joined the humans nor opposed them, content to wait and see which direction the galaxy would turn. 5 species led by the Vorthan hardliners, who refused to accept their fall from supremacy, had formed the last Concord, determined to resist human influence at any cost. For 6 months, they had launched attacks against continuity territory, believing that enough violence would somehow restore the old order. They had been wrong. The war, if it could even be called that, had been brief and devastating, not for humanity, but for the last Concord. Human technology, refined over to millennia of survival in the harshest environment in the galaxy, proved impossible to match. Every attack was repelled. Every offensive was crushed. And yet, not once did human forces pursue their enemies into their home territories. Not once did they target civilian populations. Not once did they seek revenge. They simply defended and waited. Eventually, the last Concord's populations had risen up against their own leaders. Ordinary citizens, seeing their fleets destroyed while humanity offered peace instead of conquest, had begun to ask dangerous questions. Why were they fighting? What were they defending? A system that had brought them to ruin. One by one, the holdout species had sued for peace. Now, representatives of all 30 spacefaring species in this region of the galaxy had gathered on Earth. H-humans, the species who had joined the continuity during the exile, the former Concord members who had defected, the neutrals who had finally chosen a side, and yes, even the 5 species who had fought against humanity until the very end. All of them here to sign the Charter of Remembered Peoples. Yuki walked to the podium at the center of the amphitheater. 30 delegations fell silent, their varied forms turning toward her. 2,000 years ago, she began. Humanity stood before the Galactic Concord and was judged unworthy. We were called chaotic, aggressive, unstable. We were sentenced to exile in a region of space considered worthless, and we were erased from history. She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. We survived, not alone but with the help of other species who had been judged and discarded just as we were. The Veth, the Morath, the Kelani, dozens of others who found their way to the dead expanse because they had nowhere else to go. Yuki looked at the VEF delegation, at Ambassador Kirixis's grandchildren sitting in places of honor. Together, we built something new. Not an empire based on conquest, but a community based on acceptance. Not a hierarchy of superior and inferior species, but a partnership of equals. We called it the human continuity, but that name never really fit. It was never just about humans. It was about everyone who had been told they weren't good enough. She gestured to the assembled delegations. Today, we take the final step. Today, we dissolve the human continuity and create something larger. Something that includes every species here, regardless of their past. The Charter of Remembered Peoples establishes a new principle for galactic civilization. No species will ever be judged unworthy again. No species will ever be erased from history. Every people, every culture, every unique way of being, all of it will be preserved and valued. The formal signing began. One by one, representatives approached the central table and added their species mark to the charter. Humans and Veth, Sireni and Morvani, even the species who had fought against humanity until months ago, now accepting a future they had once feared. When Elder Corinth approached the table, the amphitheater fell utterly silent. The ancient Vorthan moved slowly, his age visible in every step. He had been stripped of his title after the last Concord's collapse, but humanity had invited him personally to this ceremony. Not to humiliate him, but to offer him something he had denied humanity 2,000 years ago. A chance. Corinth reached the table and looked at the charter. His galaxy-filled eyes moved across the words, pausing at the passages that explicitly forbade the practices the old Concord had considered essential. No genetic purity tests, no psionic requirements, no civilizational harmony assessments. This is everything we believed in, he said, his voice carrying across the silent amphitheater. Everything we stood for. It's all being swept away. Yes, Yuki said simply. It is, and you want me to sign this? To endorse the destruction of everything my people built. I want you to help build something better. Corinth was silent for a long moment. Then he said, I was there, 2,000 years ago. I was a young adjudicator, barely a century old. I voted to exile humanity. I believed we were protecting the galaxy from a dangerous, unstable species. He looked at Yuki directly. I was wrong. About everything. About what makes a species worthy. About what makes a civilization strong. About what happens when you throw people away instead of embracing them. He reached for the signing device. My signature won't undo the harm I caused. Nothing can undo that. But perhaps it can be the beginning of something different. He signed. The amphitheater erupted in applause, not mockery, but genuine celebration. Former enemies embracing a new future together. After the ceremony, as the delegations mingled and celebrated, a young Sireni journalist approached Yuki. Ambassador Tanaka, I have a question. Many people are wondering why humanity didn't simply conquer the former Concord. When you had the chance, your military superiority was absolute. You could have ruled the galaxy by force. Why didn't you? Yuki smiled. She had been waiting for this question. Because we remember, she said. We remember what it felt like to stand before the Concord and be told we weren't good enough. We remember watching our home world disappear behind us as we sailed into exile. We remember every year of struggle, every generation of sacrifice, every species that joined us because they had nowhere else to go. She looked out at the crowd, humans and aliens, former enemies and longtime friends, all celebrating together on the restored Earth. If we had conquered the Concord, we would have become exactly what we fought against. We would have proven that might makes right, that the strong should rule the weak, and eventually, someone stronger would have risen to conquer us. So you chose mercy instead. We chose to be better than those who hurt us. We chose to build a future where no one ever has to feel the way we felt when we were thrown away. Yuki paused. That's not mercy. That's justice. Real justice, not punishment, but the creation of a world where the crime can never happen again. The journalist considered this. And if it does happen again? If some future power rises and decides to judge others as the Concord did? Yuki looked at the sky, at the stars becoming visible in the darkening evening. Then they'll find a galaxy united against them. 30 species who remember what happens when you throw people away. 30 species who chose to value each other instead of ranking themselves, she smiled. The Concord tried to erase us. Instead, they created us. Now we're creating something new, a galaxy where being different isn't a crime. Where every species, no matter how strange or chaotic or young, has a place. She turned back to the celebration, where a human child was playing with a Veth young one and a Vorthan elder watched them both, with something like wonder in his ancient eyes. We were banished and forgotten, Yuki said. And look what we built with our exile. Now imagine what we'll build together. The journalist nodded slowly, then went to file her story. Yuki stayed a moment longer, watching the celebration. Somewhere in the crowd, she knew, was the journal of Elena Vasquez, preserved for 2,000 years, passed down through her family, finally returned to the planet where it had been written. The last entry, written the day the exile began, read simply, "They threw us away. They will regret it, but not because we will take revenge, because we will become everything they said we could never be." Promise kept, and the galaxy would never be the same.